lot of their campaign financing from the same people. Companies in Texas and Arkansas, the same companies have been financing both families. I think they're too closely aligned on policy issues, on trade issues. I just don't see any differences between the families.
Who do you like in 08?
I'm not sure yet. I'm very interested in Barack Obama. I know he doesn't have as much experience as a lot of people would like, but there's been other presidents in history that haven't, such as Lincoln, for example. And it might actually be beneficial right now, because if you look at people that have been in the White House that have had a lot of experience, like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, they've been nothing but destructive, in my opinion. So I'm keeping an open mind on both sides of the aisle.
Thanks for calling in. This is the front page of the Washington Times this morning. Big photograph of the anti-war rally. Iraq war foes mass on mall. You can see a big banner headline across the top if we could pull out a little quicker. And off in the left, there is an article about Hillary Clinton again in Iowa. Hillary off and running. We covered that. C-SPAN cameras were there. Merritt Island, Florida. Go ahead. Anyone but a Bush or Clinton?
Oh, I disagree. This is a Republican ploy. It was written by a Republican, and they want to lump her with Bush. You know, I'm not wild about her, but I'd take her over Bush any day of the week. Yes, they made some mistakes, but compared to Bush, they're saints. Absolute saints. I live in Florida. I'm double bushed. You must hear this. People are leaving the state of Florida after 8 years of Jeb Bush. Our insurance is so high. He's in bed with the insurance company. Isn't that wonderful? Well, we can't afford it. We can't afford what they're doing to us. You do not move to Florida unless you've got scads of money. All right, I sold real estate. This is a crisis. Our taxes have gone out of sight, but he's taken the intangible tax off the rich. If you want some more of that crap like you've got in the White House, you vote in that Jeb Bush. Thank you.
Boston, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to say that I am from Boston, but I am down here right now in Washington, D.C. I came to attend the anti-war rally yesterday.
But you agree anyone but a Bush or a Clinton?
I agree. I wouldn't say anyone but a Bush or a Clinton. Specifically, I believe that the ideal ticket would be Al Gore and Barack Obama. I think Al Gore on the top and Barack Obama for vice president would be an incredibly strong ticket that could win, because both Mr. Gore and Mr. Obama have been anti-war from the beginning, as was not Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, as we know, voted for the war, and she has not recanted on her vote. She's not, to my knowledge, said that she was wrong to vote for the war, which Mr. Obama and Mr. Gore both were against and vocally against from the beginning. I think that Mrs. Clinton is a very, very smart woman. I would like to have somebody very intelligent in the White House, but I think that she's unfortunately smart politically at the expense of her ideals sometimes. I think that she very closely watches the polls, but she, and of course now she says she's against the war, but I don't think that she's strong in our environment. I think that in many, many ways that she would not be a new voice. And I think although Mr. Gore won before, and as we know, won before, a lot of people say, well, he shouldn't run again because he lost the first time around, but he didn't lose the first time around.
Caller, you came down just for the rally?
Yes, I did.
And what was it like to be in the crowd?
Well, I've been here. I was here for the rally in the fall of '05. I was here for the rally when the letters were given showing that Mr. Clinton had intelligence. Mr. Bush had intelligence. And was fixing the intelligence during the run-up to the war. It was not as big as I hoped, frankly. There's a lot of people there, but I think that there should have been 10 times that many people
What
there.
do you do in Boston?
I'm a physician by profession. I've been bringing up my kids for the last number of years. I have 4 children, none of whom I hope ever end up going to a war.
How old are they, and did they come with you?
They're 23, 21, 18, and 13, and unfortunately, the 3 who are in college couldn't tear themselves away from the books to come with me, which I think, of course, if there was a draft, they would have been here. And I'm glad there's not a draft, but no, I came by myself.
All right, thanks for your call. Newark in Delaware, you disagree. Anyone but a Bush or a Clinton?
Yes, I agree that Hillary Clinton is very intelligent. I think she's got the best interests of the people. There's one thing I'd like to touch base with, the war in Iraq. We either need to send more troops in, and special troops, not just the Army. We need to send in troops that are trained for close combat quarters training and do what we got to do and get out of there, and then put their government in their hands, or we need to pull out immediately, because there is no end to what's going on over there. Those people know one thing and one thing only. They know fighting, and that's all they've known.
This is in the Washington Post. 3,063 fatalities. U.S. troops, 2,464 died in hostile actions, 599 in non-hostile actions. This is the front page of the Houston Chronicle. Their lead story, contractor deaths in Iraq nearing 800. You can see it there very quickly. And here's some other news that we wanted to share with you this morning. Number one, Senator Kerry is in Davos, Switzerland. U.S. a pariah from Bush policies, Kerry says. Senator John Kerry, Massachusetts Democrat, slammed the foreign policy of the Bush administration yesterday, saying it has caused the U.S. to become a sort of international pariah. Mr. Kerry, the 2004 presidential nominee, made the comment as he responded to a question about whether the U.S. government had failed to adequately engage Iran's government before the election of hardliner Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in 2005. He said the Bush administration has failed to adequately address a number of foreign policy issues. He was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And another article in the Washington Times this morning, YouTube revenue may go to users. This is also from Davos. Chad Hurley, co-founder of YouTube, said yesterday that his wildly successful site will start sharing revenue with its millions of users. Mr. Hurley said one of the major proposed innovations is a way to allow users to be paid for content. YouTube, which was sold to Google for $1.65 billion in November, has become an internet phenomenon. About 70 million videos are viewed on the site each day. We're getting an audience large enough where we have an opportunity to support creativity, to foster creativity through sharing revenue with our users, Mr. Hurley said. And in the Washington Post, Sudan's peace deal, seen as a Bush success, is endangered. Glenn Kessler writes that a peace agreement that 2 years ago ended Africa's longest-running conflict and that the White House considers one of President Bush's signature achievements is in danger of unraveling because of inattention by top U.S. officials and growing tensions between Sudan's government and the former rebels who signed the deal, according to experts and congressional offices. That's in the Washington Post. In the New York Times this morning, experts see peril in Bush health proposal. Robert Pear writes that with his proposal to uproot a tax break that has been in place for more than 60 years, President Bush has touched off an impassioned debate over the future of the employer-based system that provides health insurance to more than half of all Americans. Quote, changing the tax code is a vital and necessary step to making health care affordable, Mr. Bush said in his State of the Union address. Mr. Bush said his proposals would eliminate a bias in the tax code that strongly favored insurance provided by employers over coverage bought by individuals and families outside the workplace. Paul Frunston, director of health research at the Employee Benefit Research Institute, said the president's proposal would mean the end of employer-based benefits as we know them. It gives employers a way out of providing the benefit because their employees could get the same tax break on their own. And also in the New York Times, Israel may have violated arms pact, U.S. officials say. The Bush administration will inform Congress on Monday that Israel may have violated agreements with the U.S. when it fired American-supplied cluster munitions into southern Lebanon during its fight with Hezbollah last summer, the State Department said on Saturday. One more article before we go back to calls. U.S. missiles in East Europe opposed by locals and by Russia. Bush administration plan to deploy a missile defense shield in Eastern Europe is drawing protests from Russia and from residents who oppose hosting foreign military bases and fear the facilities might make their countries targets for attack. Their proposed placement of about 10 interceptor missiles in Poland and a radar tracking station in the Czech Republic would pose a clear threat to Russia, according to the chief of Russia's space forces. Back to your calls on whether or not anyone but a Bush or a Clinton. Las Vegas, Nevada. Go ahead.
How do you do? I'd like to start off by just enlightening a couple of your earlier callers. One of them was talking about how much Bush has done in light of terrorism, and if he thinks, if anybody really believes that that this war is about terrorism and not about the military-industrial complex, they don't even, in my opinion, deserve to have an opinion. I say no more Bush, no more Clinton, but I'm going to take it a little bit further. I say no more Cheney, no more Rumsfeld, no more Kissinger, no more Baker, because these people are the people that are not confined to term limits and have actually had a part in the White House or have been involved in terrific manifestations of lies and the ruining of lives in order to regain power in the White House for some of the last 30 years. Now, I'm 48 years old, and a couple of years ago at the 2004 Democratic Convention, I saw Barack Obama, and tears were in my eyes because I said, man, this is what, as a child, I was led to believe this country was about. And what we need to do is we need to, do a dragnet and get them all out. And your caller who said the media should straighten up, the media is never going to straighten up. It's owned by the corporations, and the reporters are unable to actually report the truth because the corporations don't benefit from that. The only place you're going to get your real information is on the Internet, and that's why it seems like they're starting a campaign to try to get rid of that.
All right, thank you, caller. Michael Hirsch from Newsweek will be out here in about 5-7 minutes or so. Talk with him about politics and some other issues, and we'll also be joined by Eason Jordan, former chief news executive for CNN, who founded IraqSlogger.com, in case you want to get on that site and look at that. And Bill Sammy will also be out here. He'll be out here about 8:30. He's with the Center for Naval Analyses. He's the Iran analyst. We'll be talking about Iran's involvement in Iraq with him. By the way, we've heard Vice President Cheney mentioned a couple times. Newsweek has an interview with him this week. You can find that at newsweek.com. Want to point that out in case you're interested. And in the LA Times, we found some articles we thought you might be interested in, and this is one of their editorials this morning. Move up the California primary. California will be scorned no more. That is the sentiment driving state legislators to move up the state's next presidential primary to early February. Even though it held its 2004 primary in March instead of June, the nation's largest state was not a factor in the party's nomination battles because they were all but over by the time Californians went to the polls. The state was going to return to a June primary, but the legislature is considering having only a local primary in June and catapulting to near the front of the line with a presidential primary that would immediately follow the first contests in Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. Sacramento is right to want to make the state a player in presidential races, the LA Times writes. At the same time, the front-loading of each party's nomination process is not a healthy development. That's in the LA Times, as is this op-ed. This is by David Bell. He's a professor of history at Johns Hopkins University and a contributing editor to the New Republic. And his editorial is, Was 9/11 Really That Bad? In case you're interested in reading it, if you go to latimes.com, you'll be able to see it there. And finally, at LA Times, this is an article by Chuck Neubauer and Tom Hamburger. A deal in the desert for Senator Reid, ? It's hard to buy undeveloped land in booming northern Arizona for $166 an acre, but now Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid effectively did just that when a longtime friend decided to sell property owned by the employee pension fund that he controlled. In 2002, Reid paid $10,000 to a pension fund controlled by Claire Haycock, a Las Vegas lubricants distributor, and his friend for 50 years. The payment gave the senator full control of the 160-acre parcel in Bullhead City, Arizona, that Reid and the pension fund had jointly owned. Reid's price for the equivalent of 60 acres of undeveloped desert was less than 1/10 of the value the assessor placed on it at the time. 6 months after the deal closed, Reid introduced legislation to address the plight of lubricants dealers who had their supplies disrupted by the decisions of big oil companies. It was an issue the Haycock family had brought to Reid's attention in '94. If Reid were to sell the property for any of the various estimates of its value, his gain on the $10,000 investment could range from $50,000 to $290,000. And it goes on to talk more about the case. In case you're interested, that was in the LA Times. Battleground, Washington, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Hi.
I think that the press has already started some unfair negative press against Clinton. I support her. I would like to know more about what she has to tell our country. And as far as Bush, I wanted to address the caller previously. Bush owning up to taking responsibility for the war. I think he only owned up at the very end when nobody else would listen to him.
And the last call on this topic of anyone but a Bush or Clinton, Concord, New Hampshire. You agree?
I definitely agree. I think that this actually goes back to '94. I think that when the Republicans tried the contract with America and then started with the idea of term limits, but then took them away, I think the document was no longer worth the price of the paper was on. I think that the fact we do not have term limits in this country is really a big problem. I think that the Founding Fathers, when they had an idea what this country was about, had no idea that it would become this, where you have senators like Kennedy and other senators who are here for like 30, 40 years. And I don't believe that that's what the Founding Fathers wanted. I think they wanted someone to serve for a short period of time and then go back to their home to be that much wiser. I just don't think that that's what's happening in this country. I think you have too many people. It's like the same people that go to Washington, they live there for 40, 50 years and lose touch with the constituents that are back home. And I think as long as we don't have term limits other than the presidency, that this is going to continue. And it doesn't matter what the last name is, because a few callers did refer to this, that you're going to have the same people on their staff, the same people backing them, the same people providing them money. And as long as that continues, I really think this country's in big trouble.
Thank you for your input this morning. This, just to let you know, these are the two lead stories in the New York Times this morning. The lead story is Saudi officials seek to temper the price of oil after the market reaches $77 a barrel, efforts to stabilize it near $50 a barrel. And right to the left of that, in law school, Obama found political voice. Harvard helped shape role as a conciliator. And Hillary Clinton did not make the front page of the New York Times. She made the front page of most of the other papers because of her Iowa, but she didn't make the front page of the New York Times. Michael Hirsch of Newsweek is next. We'll be right back.
Here's a look at the guests and topics to be discussed on this weekend's news and public affairs shows. This week, we'll host Democratic Senator Joseph Biden and Republican Senator Dick Lugar to talk about Iraq. Republican Representative Duncan Hunter will also be on the program. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Democratic Senator Jim Webb, and Republican Senator Arlen Specter will be on this week's Face the Nation. All will discuss Iraq. On Meet the Press, former Arkansas Governor Republican Mike Huckabee. Also, Democratic Senator Charles Schumer, Republican Senator David Vitter, former speechwriter for President Bush Michael Gerson, and Kenneth Pollack from the Brookings Institution. Fox News Sunday hosts Republican Senator Sam Brownback. He'll address the war in Iraq, as well as presidential politics. Independent Senator Joseph Lieberman will also be on the program. He'll talk about Iraq. And on Late Edition this week, Democratic Senators Jay Rockefeller and Christopher Dodd, Republican Senator John Kyle, and former Maryland Lieutenant Governor, Republican Michael Steele. You can listen to the re-airs of these programs every Sunday beginning at noon Eastern on C-SPAN Radio. This weekend on Book TV, from Brandeis University, former President Jimmy Carter defends his latest, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid.
I am convinced that the withdrawal of Israeli occupying forces from Arab territories will dramatically reduce any threats to Israel.
Following former President Carter's speech, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz will also speak. Jimmy Carter and Alan Dershowitz at Brandeis University, tonight at 11 Eastern on Book TV. Book TV, every weekend on C-SPAN 2.